What's up, OU fans? Welcome to Season 2, Episode 5 of Opportunity Unlocked. Your host, Noah Ifrigan here. Thank you for tuning in. Today, I interview Ellen Hislop, co-founder of The Gist. The Gist is a sports media startup challenging the status quo of the male-dominated sports industry. They create sports content by women for all sports fans through their newsletter, podcast, social media, and more. Ellen is a Queen's Commerce grad and worked as an insurance underwriter before founding the Toronto-based company in 2017 with her co-founders JC and Roslyn. Since then, they have reached hundreds of thousands of followers and even just recently closed their latest funding round. I am a huge fan of Ellen and the mission of The Gist, as you'll come to know throughout this podcast. I've been following them since 2018 and have been hooked ever since. I highly recommend you check them out. And if you're not convinced now, I'm sure this interview with Ellen will get you on board. Here we go. Season 2, Episode 5 starts now. Ellen, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me, Noah. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So before we start, and you already know this about me, I'm a huge fan of The Gist. I've been following you guys since 2018 when you were just starting up in the Digital News Innovation Challenge led by Facebook. And now here you are, hundreds of thousands of subscribers later, plus millions of dollars of funding as well. Congrats. I've been following your journey. I'm a huge fan.
No, thank you so much. It's so cool to be able to chat with a gister who's been there since day one. I really appreciate it and hope you've enjoyed the growth of the journey along the way.
Oh, absolutely. So for our audience, just to make sure, we all have a good understanding here, I'd love to hear about The Gist's mission from you yourself, the co-founder.
Yes, really, our purpose is to level the playing field in the sports industry. I think that it's no surprise to anyone that it's definitely a very male-dominated space, not only from who is on air, but also who is really deemed a fan or is brought into the fandom and the community that sports provides. So really, we're trying to level the playing field by providing equality not only to the coverage that we provide in terms of giving more female athletes as well as women's sports equal coverage in comparison to men's sports, but we're also centering women's voices. Our entire content team and our entire team in general is women. And then, we're also thinking about how we're able to engage a different type of sports fan. So a lot of traditional sports websites and sports media really do focus on that avid male sports fan. And to us, sports are just so special and they really are so unique in how they can unite people regardless of age, race, gender, religion, what have you. But for anyone who doesn't fit that avid sports fan mold, it can kind of be hard to get into. And so we're really all about just making The Gist as inclusive, as accessible, and as fun as possible so that no matter if you are an avid sports fan or if you are very new to the sports scene or if you're somewhere in between, you feel like you have a community or what we like to say as ourselves, your witty sports obsessed best friend that you could go to learn more and to feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm. And, interestingly, I would call myself an avid sports fan, but I've taken to your newsletter so much, just the way you portray content in a different way. It's so much less information heavy. It's much more just fun, as you say, witty, and inviting overall.
Well, thanks so much. Our biggest thing and the reason why we started The Gist is because we felt like we were the consumers, right? And we were seeing this problem in terms of the way that sports content was kind of being portrayed for us for so many years just wasn't necessarily resonating with us. It was, to your point, exhaustive, long, not always that much fun. It was always so hard to find everything and stay up to date on everything because the industry is moving so fast and because there are so many games. And so we just really wanted to curate everything. We wanted to provide context to everything, and we wanted to storytell a little bit more. We were kind of finding that so much sports media was focused on the stats and everything like that, which, I love stats. I think that they're great, but I think a key thing that we always like to provide in our newsletter, which everyone can subscribe to at thejustsports.com, but a big thing that we like to add in is the so what and the why should you care. And then of course add some witty banter around it as well.
The witty banter is always fun. I always love to read that. Now, let me ask you first. So, in terms of subscribers, now you guys are at around 140,000 as of April. Is that correct?
Yes. So we are. Our Q2 numbers are actually pushing 200,000, which is really exciting.
Awesome. And so, what's your strategy for getting new subscribers and maintaining high engagement at the same time?
Ooh, this is $1 million question, Noah.
Yes.
This is something that we're constantly working on, and that is really joint efforts in tandem with our growth team as well as our content team. So I think that there's a couple of ways to look at things in terms of the subscribers that we're bringing on, as well as the content that we're creating to try to retain our subscribers as much as possible. So there are a few ways that we like to bring on subscribers. And I think the easiest way to kind of outline it is that we have high quality channels of growth. And then I would say that we have low quality channels, but high volume channels of growth. And so the way that we kind of would split those up, Noah, would be things like Facebook ads, Instagram ads would be high quality subscribers that come through there. They generally have a high open rate. They click through our newsletters a lot. They're clicking on our ads content. They like to follow us on Instagram too. And generally they stay with us as a gister for a long period of time. Some other high quality channels would be TikTok ads, PR, our referral program, anything that comes in organically whenever we advertise or do cross promotions through other newsletters, anything like that, I would say is high quality channels. Then we look at kind of the low quality channel side of things. And that's when you start to think about contesting. So when you partner with other companies to try to bring on a huge group of email subscribers, or when you're working on something like co-registration. So if someone's buying something on a website, let's call it a jersey on the website, they can also opt in to subscribe to the gist at the same time. Or if we're doing some sort of social contest where we're also gathering emails, those types of things we would consider low quality subscribers. With those types of channels, what's amazing is that the cost of acquisition is really low, but generally so are their open rates as well as their engagement rates. And so what we do is we automatically churn out subscribers that aren't engaging with our content, because we know that some of them would just be in it for the contest. And so that's the fine balance that kind of we're trying to maintain, is growing our audience while still keeping that engagement rate high. And that's why the healthy subscriber list and churning out the bad folks or the low quality folks is really important to us.
Mm-hmm. So even if your subscriber count climbs, if it's not with high engagement, then you churn it out?
Exactly.
Huh, interesting. Okay, cool. Yeah, so very much it's about finding this balance between the high quality channels and the low quality channels. I'm sure you guys have you have a lot of thought going into that internally.
Exactly. Roslyn is so one of my co-founders, Roslyn, CPA, CA, very analytical. And so she's really taken over the growth side of things and is doing really great in terms of looking at the lifetime value of a gister in comparison to the cost of acquisition per channel, and trying to figure out what the ratio should be for each channel in the long run.
That sounds like some fun math to do there. I love it. Yeah. So this is kind of a good transition here. I want to talk to you about the background that you and your co-founders all came from. You specifically, you studied commerce at Queen's, also my alma mater, go Queen's. And after Queen's, you graduated, you worked in insurance for about 4 years, and then you decided, because of a boozy wine dinner one night, that you were going to go co-found a company with two of your friends with this mission. So I would love to hear about that transition and that leap, and the courage that you had to summon for that.
Yes. So definitely working in the corporate world was very different. And looking back now that it's been so many years out of the corporate world, I kind of shake my head and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I worked in insurance for so long. So yes, we came up with the just literally randomly one night having takeout and white wine and just shooting the shit about different types of things. And after we had kind of ideated on the gist, it was something that we started doing as a side hustle. So in the early days after we came up with the idea, it was getting together every single weekend to talk through our business plan, getting feedback from people, looking up different research with respect to the industry, figuring out what our content would look like, creating content, figuring out the back end technology, all of that sort of thing, for about 6 months or so. And then this was in 2017. So February 2017, when we first came up with the idea. And we launched by the end of 2017, a soft launch, a very, very soft launch in Toronto, Ontario. And in September, we did some beta testing, and that's when things started really ramping up. We asked all of our friends and family to provide us feedback on our newsletters and things like that. And finally, we felt like we were ready by December. December, we had this massive launch party with 200 plus people who were there, gave them a big presentation on what they could expect from the gist. We had free food, free booze. All that you had to do was subscribe to the gist to come into the party. And I think that's one of the best things that we did. But anyway, after that, it was purely just a side hustle. But what was great is that we were starting to see some really organic growth and some strong growth numbers and positive feedback from our gisters and our audience. And one day, actually, one of our gisters, who was also helping out with writing here and there, emailed us and said, hey, there's this really cool program with Ryerson, which of course is a university in Toronto, but Ryerson and the DMZ, which is the #1 university-based incubator in the world, as well as Facebook. And this is the program that you were talking about before, Noah, with the Facebook Journalism Project. And with that project, 5 companies across Canada were provided $100K in non-dilutive funding, $50K in Facebook ad credits, an office space for 6+ months, as well as access to mentorship, which in the entrepreneurial world and the startup world, that is truly unheard of from that non-dilutive side of things. And so once we heard about this and we thought that it was something that we could apply to, JC, my other co-founder, so there's 3 of us, JC, Roslyn, and I really just went pedal to the metal in our application, got into the top 10. We worked so hard on our pitch. And then we were selected as one of the top 5. And when you're talking about courage to leave our job, it was a lot easier because we said to ourselves, if we get into this program, we're going to quit our jobs. And so getting into that program and having the validation of all of those judges, as well as the DMZ and Facebook, really helped us say, okay, we are actually going to leave these cushy corporate jobs that we like, but aren't doing too much for us, but we were enjoying ourselves still, in order to go and work on the gist.
Gotcha. So firstly, I have to say, can't believe I didn't get the invite to that launch party, but I expect I expect the invite in the future. Secondly, so that was the moment where the courage came in, where it was like, okay, it's time to actually get serious and take the leap.
Yes. So we had decided, we had a very serious conversation. I can still remember it was on, I think, Rosalind's couch in her apartment. And we just kind of said, okay, we think that we have a good chance at this. If we get into this, are we all down to quit our jobs? And we all said yes. And I can, it's probably one of the craziest moments or most fun moments of my life when we got that email from the DMZ saying that we were in the top 5. It was an afternoon before the long weekend. I was headed actually back home to my parents' place that night to celebrate my mom and her retirement. And this email came through saying that we got in, and I just freaked out, jumped up right away, called JC and Roz, and it was just an incredible moment because by Monday I walked into my boss's office and I was like, hey, I'm out of here. Here are my 2-3 weeks.
And they were like, no. And then the company went bankrupt.
I mean, yeah, no. They threw a nice party.
Yeah. Well, congrats to your family for your mom's retirement. That's awesome. But yeah, no, that must have been an amazing moment. I'm sure there were lots of great high fives and hugs right after that, and things just got real. And I'm sure that celebration turned pretty quickly into, all right, time to buckle up and actually get after this thing because we're taking it seriously now.
Yes, it was really great to be able to start the GIST full time with the help of the DMZ and all of the mentors because we had no freaking clue what we were doing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And now you do, or you're still trying to figure it out?
We are always trying to figure things out. There's things every single day that I'm like, wait, what? We have to do this? What? How do we even do this? Which is great and it keeps things exciting. But now we also have an amazing team around us and we have hired really smart people to support us and have, tried our best to close out our skills gaps with our team and with our advisors and our mentors. So that very much helps us now that it's more than just the three of us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, you must feel sort of a sense of relief and almost validation for the recent round of funding you guys got. $1 million from a variety of investors: 3GP Capital, JDS Sports, August Groups. How does that feel? To have that validation by some real backers financially.
Yeah, you know what? It's great. I think that it really just shows that we've had some really great traction since we started the GIST, and people are recognizing that and they want in and they do want to bet on women and what we're doing with the GIST. And I also think that it is reflective of what you're seeing in the sports industry and just the world and society, I would say, at large. But I think, you're seeing an increase in corporate sponsors in women's sports. You're seeing more women get involved in investments themselves. You're seeing women finally starting to get paid more. You're seeing everyone starting to care more about female athletes and women's sports when it's not an Olympic year. So I think that, change was in the offing and we were there at the right moment. I should say, Noah, too, we did raise a friends and family round before this one. We were also part of another incubator with Techstars and NBCU, Comcast Universal. So with that as well, we did receive funding there. And so I think that was kind of our initial launching pad. And with the raise this time, what was really great is that it was less convincing because we had numbers to back us up. We had really strong brand partners to back us up. And we had a strong brand that we've been building over these last couple of years.
Awesome. Well, huge congratulations on that. And I know you and your team are genuinely super passionate about the mission that you guys are putting forward. And to your point, to read out some stats here just about how women's sports viewership is growing and getting more attention. The NWSL, National Women's Soccer League, up 493% in viewership. WNBA up 68%, both in 2020. So, clearly there's a trend here and you guys are very much taking advantage of it in the best way possible.
Yeah, totally. I mean, sports are sports, and anyone who loves sports or is a sports fan, and again, any type of sports fan can appreciate and wants to watch and wants to support all of the incredible athletes that are out there, men, women, or non-binary.
Love it. I also wanted to talk to you about the transition. We were talking before about figuring things out along the way. What was it like taking the step? You're the head of content at the GIST, and what was it like taking the step towards becoming essentially a content creator? Writing. You are one of the hosts of your podcast. How did you learn to pick up that skill and use this fun voice, but also direct and informative voice in all of your content?
Oh my gosh, this took a lot of practice, Noah. So, as you mentioned, I have an undergrad degree in commerce. So, definitely not a lot of writing within that program. But what I will say is that since I want to say in grade 2, my goal had always been to be a sportscaster, to be a sports broadcaster, to be a journalist, to be in the industry. It wasn't until high school when I started, I think, listening to that rhetoric of there's only a certain amount of space for women in sports. You really work shitty hours. The industry is really competitive, so you're not going to get paid well. And so in high school, I was kind of between the choice of go get a commerce degree or go do a journalism degree and get an undergrad there. And And of course, I decided to go the commerce route. But a big thing to me, because I did really enjoy writing, was to still take courses that allowed me to flex that muscle a lot. So I'm really glad that I did that in my undergrad and took electives that actually taught me a lot of things in terms of writing and learning and how to be a critical thinker. With respect to the gist specifically, I leaned a lot on my passion for sports and my knowledge for sports, but also, to be honest, Noah, for my whole life, I definitely feel like I had been that resource for so many of my friends to say, hey, what is going on tonight? Which player should I choose in my fantasy league? Who are you taking in the pick'em pool this week? What does XYZ mean? Because I was hopeful that a lot of my friends and family would feel like they could come to me and I would give them great advice or teach them a few things here and there. And I also had my dad, who was basically doing the same thing to me growing up. But between the two of us, we were just totally obsessed with sports. So writing about sports became very natural to me because it was something that truly I'd been giving the gist of what was going on in sports for so many of my friends and family for so long. I just never done it in a official capacity. That said, figuring out the voice was super hard, especially with, it feeling so personal and me writing kind of things at the beginning. I think that the biggest thing was the thing that has stayed the most, I would say, is the curation, the context, and the cleverness and the wittiness. I would say at the beginning, we were probably a little bit more satirical than we are now. We were probably a little bit more millennial Gen Z, I would say, than we are now. A little bit more Betches vibes than now. We're still also, I'd say, professional. And so that anyone can really subscribe to the gist. And a lot of that and a lot of those changes are really just listening to our audience. Like everything we do at the gist is from the audience upwards. I still read and respond to every single one of our emails that comes into Hi at the Gist. I'm still reading through all of our DMs on Instagram because that feedback from our audience is so important because we are an audience-based company. Everything that we do is for them. And so that's how we're constantly kind of iterating. So I will say at the beginning, it was me writing, JC and Rosalind editing, even though they had no background in editing. And then we started having members of our team reach out to us being like, hey, I love the gist, but you guys need some help. And we were like, oh my God, thank God we do need some help. And so with that, we were able to bring on a few team members who are still with us 2.5 years later, God bless them, who came on at the beginning days to be like, hey, I want to help with your Twitter. Hey, I want to refine your newsletter a little bit. Like, hey, you really need some editing help. And with them and with all of the team members that we have on the newsletter now, we've been able to find this really great groove and great voice. And we all kind of work off of this newsletter style guide. That's almost our Bible for the gist.
That's awesome to hear that you had support from friends that offered their services and they're still along for the ride. That's amazing. And so what's your writing process? Like you sit down and how do you put words on paper?
I think that depends on everything, and I think this is probably an answer that you'll get from all of the writers is you have to ask questions so much about what you're writing and what is the purpose for, and you have to really understand who your audience is too. So it really depends on, am I writing something for the gist? Is it on newsletter? Is it on podcast? Is it on social? All three of those different channels and platforms have different types of audiences. So what is the makeup of each of those audiences? If I'm choosing a specific topic, why am I choosing a specific topic? And how am I going to get my point across for said topic? Am I just giving the gist of how the NBA play-in tournament works? That's a very different discussion than, okay, we're actually going to dive into the pay equality piece with the U.S. women's national team, and we're giving an update on everything that's happening there. And so you kind of have to think through all of those different types of questions in terms of purpose, audience, how much length do I have? What is my point? What else is going on in the newsletter? What are the other sections talking about, and how does it all flow? So I would say there is a process, but it's more question driven from a per newsletter perspective than maybe what a lot of people would think.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, no, I ask because it feels as if the voice of the gist is very authentic and genuine. It feels like I'm reading you or your co-founders or any of your other content creators, their genuine voice, and that isn't necessarily always the case, which is why my curiosity was piqued there.
Yeah, no, definitely no. I mean, the voices for sure. We want to feel like we have a very distinct brand voice on the other side of things, and we really do want you to feel like you're just talking to a friend. And so that is very, very purposeful. And the way that our team kind of works is that we have a North American writer, we have a US writer, and those two really tackle what's going on from a national perspective because our newsletter is Canadian, American, and then we have specific regions that kind of funnel off of that. So let's say if you are subscribed to our Canadian newsletter, you get all of the content that would be in our Canadian newsletter. But if you're also in Toronto and you subscribe to Toronto, you would get an additional section at the bottom of your newsletter specifically for Toronto so that you can stay up to date on everything that's happening local. So generally what happens is on a newsletter night, Noah, to get into it would be we hop on a call from a national perspective on both the US and Canadian side of things, figure out what we want to have in the newsletter from a national perspective. And then I'll hop on a call with our regional team and we'll walk through based off of the national newsletter, what do you want to talk about in each regional newsletter? And then the voice and the tone is something that is coached basically throughout every single newsletter and that all four of our writers really have a great sense of and a part of that voice is really through hiring and how we're hiring people and how we're bringing them on and do they also have experience or do they have the ability to be coached to have or to work with a brand voice.
Gotcha. And that newsletter, so newsletter night happens 3 times a week, or as some might say, thrice weekly. I just wanted to throw thrice in there.
Yeah. You know what? I kind of like thrice. I think it's a fun
Thrice
word.
is great.
Yeah.
It's totally fun. I totally agree. It's way better than 3 times. Like, that just, come on, conventional
Yeah.
English.
Thrice weekly.
So, thrice weekly. I love it. Okay, so yeah, final question here. Speaking about how your sort of experience was approaching the sports world as a woman, the intimidation you might have felt early on, especially from some of the statistics in terms of underrepresentation. What is your advice or message to young women, or really anyone who might be intimidated a little bit from getting into the sports world?
Mm-hmm. I always find this an interesting question when I'm asked it because I honestly don't have much experience in the sports industry. Like I created a company with Rosalind and JC to get into the sports industry. I've never worked in the classic traditional sense of the sports industry beforehand. But what I can say is, we've definitely felt that from meeting up with other media companies or working with different partners with respect to the industry. I would say, especially in Canada, the industry is very traditional. There's not too many players in this space. And it can be intimidating when you are walking into a room and the majority of people that you are seeing are, middle-aged white men who have been around and in the industry for a while, or they've been in media for a while. I think, though, what's really exciting is that the sports industry, especially on the content side of things, is changing a lot, and they're trying to figure out how to speak to the Gen Zs of the world, the millennials of the world, because traditional media, for the most part, does kind of skew that age 44 plus. Even, companies like The Athletic are still skewing to that age group. And while that age group is amazing and no shade to that age group at all, so many companies are trying to figure out like how younger audiences are just engaging with sports, period. And so a big thing, at least for us, that we've seen and how we hire is that we want to hire people that are representative of our audience. And we're starting to see that a lot more from other folks in the sports industry as well. And so my biggest advice to young folks who are entering the sports industry would just be that know your value in terms of you are a fan and you know how fans are going to engage with sports. And sometimes, and this happens in literally every single industry, sometimes when you're so in the mix, you forget almost like what it is just for an average person day to day when they're not in the sports industry. It was the same thing when I was in insurance. I was like, everyone's obsessed with insurance. Like no one cares about insurance at all. But when you're in the insurance industry, everyone thinks that. So I think that it's so great to be able to bring your value and say like, hey, this is how fans are actually interacting. This is what my family cares about. This is what my friends care about, and being that value add to a company is just so important right now. So I would just say lean into that as much as you can, and lean into that unique perspective that you have that so many of the higher ups at these companies just simply don't.
Awesome. I could definitely agree with you that sports is way more exciting than insurance.
Yeah.
Ellen, thanks so much for your time. OU fans, do yourselves a favor, subscribe to The Gist, subscribe to their new newsletter, follow their podcast, The Gist of It, or follow them on Instagram. If you're in Canada, The Gist CA. If you're in the US, The Gist USA. They are awesome. If you sports fan or not, you're gonna love the voice and the content they're putting together. Ellen, thanks again for your time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. No, I appreciate it.